Hey everyone, we are doing a presentation today on how to plant a tree. So this one could be fairly short. I'll try not to talk too long at you. It's a very important process if you are doing conservation work, if you are trying to reforest an area. I participated in a tree planting, and it was someone had donated their land to a local park reserve. So this used to be a farm, and they wanted to make it into more parkland. So there was a lot of just empty grass. The farm areas had already been removed a while back, so there was still some elements of the infrastructure there, but otherwise they decided that they were going to replant it. So this is how you plant a tree if you are trying to conserve and kind of change that landscape to be forest. First, you need to dig a hole. Very simple. You need it to be big enough so that way the root ball will fit into it, and have like the base of the tree trunk right at that ground level. So it needs to be big enough. You can kind of trim off some of the roots, but you want to make sure that there is enough to grow back in a hurry and take in as much nutrients as possible so that way the tree will thrive. So there is, well, I guess we'll get to that next point. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. The step two is you place the plant in the hole. This one is actually more of a bush, but it does the job credibly for the presentation. Um, but you just put it in the hole, and then step three, you fill in the hole with the soil. So for that, it is actually more complicated than one might think. It takes a lot of physical effort to do it, if depending on how much soil you do displace. But you also have to hold the tree or the bush in this context up to that ground level to ensure that the very base of those trunks stays at ground level or slightly above, just because if you do bury the base of those trunks, it's a lot of them, they're not supposed to be buried, and so you might get some rot in that area. And it's the very base of that tree, it's the infrastructure. And so if it does rot, that compromises the entirety of the tree, and so it might not actually end up thriving. So, and that can be a problem if you have soil above that line, or if you mulch above that line too. So that's something to bear in mind. And otherwise, you can use your shovel and you can put some soil back in. If it's giving you a hard time to hold that tree in place when you put the soil in, you can take it out and apply a little bit of soil beneath it, as like as the something that it can sit on or stand on, and then add in more soil. But you will be putting soil all the way up to the base right here. I forgot I could use my pointer. Apologies. It's been a long day of presentation. So you can actually um, fill the soil up to right about there, and you can kind of see that line. It says that you can see the line of, where it's appropriate if you're looking at the trunk, where it was in the ground previously, and just you can kind of tell looking at it when it starts to get to that point where it starts the roots. So you can take a close look at what's going on there and kind of try to plan accordingly. But you put all that soil back in after you have dug your hole. And then actually, because there is a root system there, um, it will, um, oh my goodness, I apologize. I just completely spaced out what I was saying there. Um, there we go. Um, but because there is that root system there, it will displace some of the soil, and that happens sometimes. So, especially if the root systems are large, you might get this mound, and that actually is okay. Obviously, you don't, like I said, you don't want it covering that particular part, the base of the tree, the base of the root system. But the next steps kind of help to eliminate the mounding that you see here, the mounding that you see now. But you do want to ensure that all of the soil ends up like in the perimeter of that hole that you dug. Because after you plant the tree and mound the soil, you will be using a hose. It's best practices to use a hose. This actually has a very long pointer. It's a like a copper tube, so that you can push that down into the hole that you have now filled, and that actually will deliver the water directly down into the roots. And because it'll fill up those spaces that were created, like air pockets, and things when you had the root system kind of blocking the soil as you put it back in. And um, so the soil should kind of sink back down into that hole. And so you won't have, you can see here like the soil is far up, but um, the water helps it sink down, and you can push it down with your boots. But you want to make sure this process can be very, very messy, because at the end of it, you do need to make sure that it's on the level where you won't have that base rot, that root rot, just automatically. It needs to be at a place where, like level with the ground around it. And so the water will help. You want it to be soupy. It literally is mud soup underneath there, and you push the soil in with your boots, and you do what you can and try and get as much soil in as possible. Otherwise, if you don't have that support underneath that tree, that soil back in that hole, it might the tree might end up kind of um, askew. It might start to lean, or it might have other concerns as well. So you do want to be conscientious of that. And then you continue to water as needed. And you can actually continue to water seedlings when you transplant plants, they can be very, very sensitive. And so you want to be hyper conscious of adding that water. You want to put a lot of water into the root systems of those freshly transplanted plants, specifically to ensure that they grow. And so you can have sprinklers going. You can, obviously that first watering is super, super important. Having that soup of underneath the root systems. You can do that multiple times, if you have the patience, and depending upon, what sort of infrastructure you have, if you've got time. Otherwise, you can set up the sprinklers also, um, and you can sprinkle for, a few weeks just to make sure that they are healthy upon that transplant, upon moving it to this site. If you have these already decently sized trees, that is kind of an important step. Planting season is late spring once the ground has thawed, or early fall. And that's, I believe, so they can either slumber over the winter, or they have that growing season where they can really take root, and then grow from there. But those are kind of when a lot of the tree planting sessions will take place. You can also direct seed in the environment, but the seedlings may be more vulnerable to miscellaneous wildlife since they aren't established. They could get trampled, they could get eaten. If they are directly on the ground, it's it's easier for small wildlife to be able to munch on those, or middling wildlife to eat those. And, deer eat bark and, it's so there are a lot of different factors, and those are larger predators as well, like the deer. So predators, plant predators, um, but you can direct seed. Sometimes even like with these, you can put cages around them to try and protect them. You can also find these trees that have cages around them to kind of give them that support, maybe some ropes. But you do want to be careful because if the ropes are too tight or if they don't, if they're not made of a material that's flexible, they can also kind of strangle the tree. The tree can grow around them. And so it can be unhealthy for growth if you do have very tight um, ropes around them. Rubber bands might be um, slightly more beneficial, but of course those can weather and they can snap pretty easily too. So um, yeah, just you can experiment with that a little bit. A lot of this I have read about, and so I've only been a part of the few tree plantings, and I've read about uh, more of the longitudinal things. It's the nature of life has you moving around quite a bit, and so I've had trees and I've seen them over years, but I've not done the observation of such things, but that's planting season. You can direct seed, and you can experiment. And obviously, trees can be used to keep runoff from occurring there or to reduce erosion essentially. But they're also good for closing canopy, adding um, extra shade, and more ecosystem for the wildlife. Are there any questions? These are, of course, pictures of the shovel and the hose that you would put into that root ball area. Any questions?